So we've got new equipment, new software, and we're going to try to be more structured moving forward.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to plead the fifth once or twice, I'm sure. But
I mean, the other ones were fun, but I realize we could have said more on the topics themselves.
yes, yeah. But that's part of this whole project is the review portion. That's one of the pieces of the formula to mastery of anything
You mean
is,
developing?
yeah, what do you know? On topic. But yeah, that is part of the formula. And I do think you could reduce it to a formula of sorts. The aspect of self-development.
Which, I mean, this ties in right away, but like when we see other people that are like doing podcasts and stuff like that and acting like, oh, I do this on the side. It's like, how do you have time? And these people typically start out with thousands of dollars of equipment. They don't have the like ramp up we've had with, you know, the the lessons learned, right? Like
Right.
they have enough time to study and prep to come in it with all the equipment and all the structure already. So like, they've probably done the learning and other experiences. Um, but they act like it's just, oh, whatever. Like you know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm so busy, but I have time to and money to do all this prep stuff. It's
And that's part of it is we mustn't trick ourselves into thinking everyone has achieved the American dream the same way of from the exact, from absolute bottom and you claw your way up somehow. If you look at most successful podcasts, those people made their money elsewhere and then did a podcast or started a podcast. Joe Rogan's a good example, right? He made his money many times over to purchase his studio equipment and his studio itself and to have the kind of guests he has. Or Tim Ferriss made his money long before his podcast. Lewis Howe is one of my favorite hosts and podcasts. He was a football player briefly.
there's the one that had the two girl host, Call Her Daddy. That's the only one I
Mm-hmm.
can off the top of my head that was started as a podcast. Like how they got rich was the
Mm-hmm.
podcast. I can't think of any other ones. I'm hoping that Dying Five gets some traction because they're fucking good.
And that's just it. If it is possible, like I don't want to come on here and be like every successful person you've ever seen was successful before they started. That's
But
true and not true.
when it comes to entertainment and businesses, right? Because like you think of the uh, is it the Paul brothers, right? Logan and Jake.
Mm-hmm.
But like they got internet famous, and then they used their internet fame to turn it into an internet business, and then they went into other businesses and all that stuff.
Right.
Which makes sense. I mean, when you're thinking about, we're already off topic, whatever. But when you're thinking about, the modern era of starting a business, like people have switched to doing the marketing aspect first, because it's cheaper to do a lot of marketing than it is to spend a lot of money on a product and then you don't know if there's a real market for it. And even if you did the research and there's a market for it, you still have to get it in front of them. So then after you do everything for the product, you'd still have to, do all the marketing to connect to those people.
Yes. And I'm going to challenge you in that we actually are on topic, even if a couple of steps ahead of ground zero from there. But really, though, I mean, self development is not so much just the achievement of a singular goal. It's not a straight line. It's very rarely a straight line. And it does take, because as you grow, you kind of blossom. You don't just shoot up like a bamboo shoot. You kind of blossom into this whole organic thing. And there's many paths to take in that. You develop skills that somehow translate to other areas. I am a good musician because I studied martial arts. And I'm a good martial artist because I watched a lot of anime and kung fu movies. But no, that's not
Well,
true at all. But you
but
get that kind of
the transference of
excitement
skills.
for it. Yeah.
Well, and it's yeah, it's the thing where it's like you can use lessons from any area. Like you can use lessons in music to talk about fitness. You can use lessons in fitness to talk about running a business and all this stuff. Because
Yep.
like for me, it was the fitness journey. I was able to build businesses and projects off of pure passion and motivation, but they always lacked structure. I was entirely working on that fuel, so when that fuel was gone, it just fell apart. It
Hmm.
wasn't until I learned the discipline involved with fitness that I can much more readily command my own willpower, um, and even in lack of willpower to maintain certain disciplines.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a saying from Miyamoto Musashi. I'm on the samurai kick.
You're
But
always
no,
on the
seriously,
samurai
he
kick.
he wrote, it's true, but there's a reason for that. He wrote the Book of Five Rings, which is his treatise on the way of the warrior type stuff. But it's used universally in modern times as a book to help develop oneself, usually in the attainment of, a lot of people use it in business or martial arts. I study it for music practice. And one of his little nuggets in there is know one thing to know 10,000 things. If you know one thing really well, you can start to apply it more universally because you start to see patterns in life. And it really does help to see it and then know what to do when you do see it. That's why successful people seem to snowball their success, is because they have a system in place, more or less, or a mindset in place. They are in a more, what's the thing where it's luck? Luck is opportunity meets
Preparation.
preparation. That's just it. They have set up that crossroads for themselves more often using the lens of their craft, usually.
Well, and it's we personally talk about this a lot because when we talk about problems and solutions on interpersonal levels, but even larger scale levels, it's or metaphysical philosophy levels. The world is simply built. It's complex in its expression, but the reality is it's simple, right? Because it's like, I had this conversation with my fiance the other day where it was, kind of the like, I do fitness stuff. But she's like, I don't have the motivation to go for a walk. I was like, I don't. I'm not doing it because like it's good, it feels good, and I'm happy to do it. I do it because I just need to fucking do it. And I have the wires built in my brain where I can flip a switch and be like, you do that now. Um, but there, from her outside perspective of it, it was kind of like you oh, you enjoy like the fitness stuff and stuff like that. It's like I do enjoy it, but I I don't always enjoy the discipline part. The discipline part is separate. It's like I don't always want to. I don't always have the energy to, but I always have the ability to flip that switch and hop in the cold shower and go for the walk or whatever it is.
Right. So self
That
development, it seems like it starts with the want to achieve something, and then the willpower, essentially the discipline, which can be two different words.
yeah, that's one of those like big things. I guess my point with it was the wow, this is the first time I had a brain fart on the thing. Um, oh, the
Hmm.
simplicity thing
Yeah.
that um, it seems complex from the outside, but the reality is I'm wearing Adidas. I'm not a big fan of Nike. Not a fan of Adidas either. But if I'm going to pick one, I'm picking Adidas. um, but it is their slogan's good. Like at some point, you have to just do it. The complexity of the situations there, and then when you talk about um, any of the, or with self development, right? One of the big things. This is definitely something I want to make sure we talk about on topic. Is it's very easy to get caught in the complexity of concepts and then fail to do the simple thing of doing the work. And
Hmm.
it's been a personal catchphrase between the two of us. Simple doesn't mean easy.
Yep. And the other, so we have like two pillars of our organization right now. It's that phrase, simple doesn't mean easy, and there are knowers and there are doers. You need
Yeah.
you need to be a doer if you actually want to see the fruits of your labor. I'm running into that right now. I spend most of my time in self development, which is on the surface level not a bad thing, but it can easily become a form of procrastination when you're not doing anything with those skills.
Yeah, so elaborate on that because I have the same trouble, and I think that's the biggest catch with it, right? Is like the fact that self help and self development books are so popular doesn't really make sense because you only need one usually to really make a big difference. So what you're doing is you're looking for the flavor that suits you, which that makes sense. Like you have to find the
Mm-hmm.
way that the story makes sense. Um, but it's very easy to get caught in that cycle of just learning.
Absolutely. Yes. It's a super cliched phrase, but all roads lead to Rome, right? And it is pretty true. It's the same as saying no one thing to know 10,000 things. Now, you want to get to fitness is probably the easiest one to talk about. It's one of the most universal ones.
Mm.
Um, you can, if you Google how to get fit, you will run into decision paralysis because you can find, and nutrition is part of all that as well. You want to open a can of worms. You can find studies whether a can of worms is good for you or not. It's crazy. And so you do need to have the, let's call it discipline. You have to have the discipline to pick a path and ignore the billboards and the off ramps and stick to the path you're on if you know it's going to help you.
Or, and this is where smart people get very frustrated, you have to have the blind confidence, right? It's the thing where it's like entrepreneur media people and thought leaders talk about it, but it's like most of the successful people in the world aren't smart, which is one of the things that drives me crazy about the this is the habits of millionaires. No, it's fucking not. Most millionaires are fucking douche dunces that don't think at all, but that's why they're successful. They they
Mm-hmm.
they they, they don't bother with other shit. They're able to just keep their mind focused. They're confident in who they are. They don't question things as much, and that makes them more successful. And one of the other episodes we talk about it a little bit. Um, but either you have to use your brain power to like control itself, or the people that are naturally inclined to be, extroverts, the people that naturally inclined to just do stupid things consistently just
Mm-hmm.
because they don't question things, they just keep moving, tend to be more successful.
Yeah. And you say do stupid things, but it's not do dumb things, right? It's not do the
Yes.
wrong things and
do,
still succeed.
do foolish things to tie it in with our brand.
It's true. It's to be stupid in a way. It's to put on the blinders, so that all you do is go forward. All you know to do is go forward. You don't think too hard about what's on either side of you. You only go forward.
Mm-hmm.
And turns out that's the key.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, blinders are usually used for racehorses. They have a track that they run on. So they go forward on the track. They don't just go forward blindly into nothing. So that's another part of that metaphor is to really think about which track you're going to be on and then just plow forward.
All right, I've had a peeve about this lately though, because the find your purpose thing, we talk about Taoism. We're gonna do our first deep dive on Taoism, but like that, the Western concept of find your purpose, um, or the modern concept, maybe. No, I mean mostly stems from the West because of the traditions. Either way, point is that there's this whole find your purpose thing. If you don't have the discipline to stick to a purpose, it's easy to keep shifting the purpose or just building out the purpose without achieving it. And that doesn't seem to get talked about. It's just like, oh, you find your purpose and all your problems are solved. One, even if that's true, it's a simple, not easy thing. And two, typically speaking, people don't have the context. Kind of back to like the happiness type thing, where it's like, oh, well, your purpose is what makes you happy. It's like, well, Yes and no, because if you're only doing what makes you happy, when you get to the hard part of fulfilling your purpose, you might be like, well, this must not be my purpose. So,
I allude to that in one of my TikToks, and it seems like you're speaking externally motivated purpose, where if I do the thing, I will be happy. Whereas the foil to that, or the true finding your purpose, could be an internal thing, not I will do this. It's I am this.
yeah. Oh,
Because
oh,
that's how you navigate life. That's how you navigate life better.
are you talking
Not
about samurais again?
I wasn't going to bring up the word samurai. But again, they were ready to die at literally any point because they were complete in who they were internally.
So, I, this is a really hot button topic when you use the phrasing of like, know who you are. Change it from find your purpose to know who you are. Um, there's a lot of things that, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago wouldn't have been part of that terminology or phrasing that are now relevant, but it still to me has the same problem where you can, decision paralysis and all that type of stuff, but that is certainly a better answer. um is to focus on it's ironically like you are a journey, so if you
Mm-hmm.
accept what the journey is, then one, the destination doesn't matter so much, but also the destination becomes inevitable. So you can just pick or find, however you want to look at it, who you are, or what journey you're taking. it, yeah, the process is more important than anything.
Absolutely. That's almost a Nordic concept where, take the story of Odin, who achieved so much knowing that Ragnarok was going to kill him, knowing absolutely he was to lose. And he still showed up, and he prepared to show up with all the glory
Hmm.
that he could. And that doesn't speak so much to what he achieved, but to who he was. And so it's good to try and meet your fate as complete as you are, as complete as you can be. And that is a journey inward, and it's not so much define who you are right then and there and stick to your guns. That can also be a form of procrastination in a way. But you have to do the work of noticing things about yourself, noticing what you maybe don't like, and asking why. Why is the most important question in the universe.
Okay, but again, it puts you down the same track of like you can keep asking why. It's the essay of the Hunchback and the Soldier. You can always ask another question.
Sure, but as soon as you start answering I don't know, you can let it sit there for a while. It is a never-ending journey, but you can be a certain way for a while until you stumble on an answer or formulate one.
I think I guess we'll for the first time start digging a little bit more into not current events, but pop culture
Sure.
stuff. But it's one of the benefits of the conservative style philosophies that there's a more of a structure, but also there's more of a how would you put grounded element to it. So, like in my personal case, switching to being a family man makes the purpose question a whole lot easier than it was when I was a bachelor. um,
Which, not to interrupt you, but that does speak to what you had said before about one or two generations ago not necessarily needing to think too hard about this.
well, yeah, because that's part of the thing with the concept of identity politics is a thing, but it's not only our identity politics a thing. Tied in that whole concept is the fact that identity has become something so subjective it can change from moment to moment, and that from this perspective of efficacy, to
Mhm.
be able to do something is not a very good strategy. Um, because yeah, you shift and move too much. And the people talk about in the concept of postmodern subjectivism. I use that word a lot in more of the uh, there's a word for it when it's like the popular use of it versus the actual definition. Uh,
Nomenclature. I don't know.
yeah, something like that. Either way,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, we've as a Western society moved really into this place where subjectivity like has become sacred in its own sense, and that seems dangerous in some ways, like, but specifically in this concept of self-development. um, One of some of the early things with this is you're perfect the way you are, which ironically one of the bits that I was looking to edit for our TikTok was, you doing the Taoism quote of, the stone doesn't need to be carved. It's perfect the way it is.
Sure. Returning to the uncarved block. Yeah.
Yeah, but the trouble is when you get people doing that kind of like, well, I'm perfect the way I am.
They're missing the point of that.
How so?
The uncarved block isn't so much the you are perfect the way you are. Returning to the uncarved block, at least in the context of what the Taoists talk about, is returning to one with the source. So the uncarved block is the source of the statue. So it's not so much the block was fine, and I do realize that's what I said last time was the block is fine. Um, so that's one level of it. But if you go even deeper, it is to return to the source, which is stillness, as we talked about.
Yeah, which is my response to it.
Right.
um,
But and that's the whole thing is the journey of self-development. We're trying to get to a higher self, whether it's professionally, spiritually, what have you. Once you get to the highest echelons you can, you start to see through the veil and realize how simple it all is.
mhm.
So it is returning to that simplicity and seeing it again, because you usually come from simplicity and return back to it at the end of the journey once you've reached the highest levels you can. And you start to see that simplicity with the new beauty. That's the story of Lord of the Rings. They leave the Shire, travel the world, save the world, return to the Shire. The Shire's the same, they have changed. And they see the Shire anew as this pure thing. Because really, the Shire is a pure place. It's very innocent.
Yeah, but neither Bilbo or Frodo wanted to stay in the Shire, so I don't know if that's a good metaphor.
It's not so much being content as just seeing the world for what it is after a while.
Still don't know if that metaphor works as well. It does without
They
knowing the
return to
story.
the Undying Lands. The metaphor is there. I promise you in Lord of the Rings. I'm not doing a good job of explaining it. That's really what it is. The metaphor is there. They return to the Shire,
Yes.
see it for what it is. They do return. They do go to the
All right.
land of the elves.
And they go to the permanent Shire, and the Bilbo who had the desire for adventure turned into a monster. All right, fine.
I think you're missing the point there. No, they go to basically what is Tolkien's version of heaven, the Undying Lands, where that is the nirvana, the enlightened
where
place,
where
whatever it
no
is,
where no
heaven,
where nobody needs to do anything.
essentially. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, but it's on topic, but pretty heady for what could be a mundane discussion on self development.
Yeah, I mean, so the wiki definition for self development is the process by which a person's character or abilities gradually develop. I, in my head, like, self development and self help, some of these other terms, although they're somewhat interchangeable, I feel like there's like a flavor that's different. Um, but right before we hopped on and started talking just in general, I was thinking about it, and at least for my feed, for content, but I realize, some of the people I follow and that have content, have thousands of likes and hundreds of thousands of views and all that stuff. The self development space um, has refracted into a bunch of different ways, but the cult is pretty pervasive. So the entrepreneur one is one of my biggest ones that, while on one hand I'm into, it's one of my biggest pet peeves when I see content from it, because so much of it's just showy entertainment nonsense.
Hmm.
We talk about it where it's the cult of entrepreneurship. But so that stemmed from the self development thing, right? Where it's like, want to be a millionaire, wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. But also, on the other hand, you get the new age thing, right? So it's all about spirituality, but that's even been distilled into like, self care and self love, and
Hmm.
make sure you do this and do that. But all of it's just self development packaged in different ways. Like at its core, it's this one singular thing that was. I mean, so Tony Robbins is like one of the big faces and characters in the whole thing, but
Absolutely, yeah.
he broke ground, and before him Jim Rohn, where self development was a thing that people didn't talk about. Some people knew about it, some people did it, but it wasn't a pop culture phenomenon. As it's came into pop culture, it has become so pervasive, and not and I go back and forth with trying to figure out if it's good, because if people saturate themselves with it enough, they do stuff, or if it's bad because it's been so diluted into entertainment that people just keep missing the point and it's getting harder to do.
Absolutely. And you've touched on many, many, many points in
Yeah.
that monologue. So let's unpack. This is good. This is good. I'm a much better editor than I'm a creator. So you just gave me a list that I can then start to pick at. So this
All
is
right,
good.
let's go.
Um, I'll kind of work backwards. So, you mentioned Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn. One of the even earlier guys is Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich.
Still
And
one of
I've
the
read
top
Think and
10.
Grow Rich.
Yeah, one of the top 10 books of all time, forever since it came out.
Sure. Let me ask you why. Why, in your opinion, is it that?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah. I told you why is the best question in the universe.
Yeah, because I'm always surprised when people recommend it, because it's similar to Dale Carnegie's, another one of that era. How to win friends and influence people. Um, how to win friends and influence people is funny because it literally just says do it. the,
Yeah.
the whole book is like, well, you want to talk to people, go to places where there's people and talk to them. It's like just a couple pages thick, and that's literally the advice. Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich is super new age metaphysic stuff.
It's where the
Um,
secret comes from.
yeah, and it's really weird. So
It is.
why it's so popular has always eluded me, because my favorite book from the self development thing is The Richest Man in Babylon. How people treat Think and Grow Rich is what The Richest Man in Babylon actually is. So
Yes.
so I don't understand I read it because it's one of the most recommended books, and it's a great notion, but it's not as good at storytelling. It's not as good practically as The Richest Man in Babylon. So if you're thinking about buying Think and Grow Rich, buy The Richest Man in Babylon. So much better.
And a much, much, much shorter read. It's much more packed into much less.
Hmm.
So you've made me think that we're describing two different types of, let's call it self-help, self-development, two different flavors. One, you can break it down to Carnegie and Hill. Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People actually gives you bullet points of tasks, essentially,
Yeah, it
right?
breaks it down into
Whoops.
lessons.
Yeah.
All the lessons are find this type of group and talk to this type of group.
Uh-huh. So instructions,
Yes.
essentially.
Yeah.
How to win friends and influence people. So this is like pretty solid instructions. Go do this. Go experience this. Hill, Napoleon Hill's thing is think this way. View things in this light. It's much more mindset than actual tangible things to do.
Hmm.
Because it is. Because
Hmm.
his whole
Okay.
thing, it could be his Napoleon Hill's whole thing is pick a goal, bend your thoughts, bend your entire life towards achieving it, essentially. And it's not so much giving you instructions on how to do that. He's just saying that if you constantly think about it, it gets into your subconscious, and your subconscious starts making decisions on how to achieve it. Not even directional, like list style decisions. It's just you want to get like fitness is probably again the easiest example. You decide to your core, I'm going to have a six pack. I'm going to have a six pack, you know, and he tells you to pick a date to do it by. That's probably his most concrete thing. It's like have an actual set date that you'd like to achieve this thing. And then all you do is remind yourself how much you want that. So put up sticky notes and have these, he has lots of catchphrases and things like that, but it's all mindset. No instructions, just all mindset, so that you start to inherently make decisions towards doing it. So you go to the store and you bypass the cookie aisle, go to the veggies. Just it's
Uh,
just one of those
Here's
things.
my question for you, because I know what my experience is.
Hmm.
You've been familiar with the mindset stuff. Does it really work though?
Not to me, but there's 8 billion people on this planet.
They wouldn't
It's,
keep buying books if the first mindset book worked.
yeah,
The
yeah.
mindset stuff, I used to be huge on it.
Hmm.
Absolutely, waist, chest, neck deep in the mindset self-development.
Hmm.
Um, because it feels good,
Right.
but it did not get results. What got results was stupid action step stuff. Which is funny because a lot
Hmm.
of people think of Tony Robbins as a mindset coach, but that's because he has to put out so much content that he does that. But if you actually read his books and you get down to like what he actually tells people, one of his quotes is motion creates emotion.
Hmm.
So he does all the fluff stuff because he makes his living uh, as an entertainer, but he makes his money as a coach. His value comes from the fact that he's part of the group that isn't about mindset. Although Jim Rohn talks about perspective shifting, so it's this weird like in between. But ultimately, in the self development world, a lot of what you hear about, or a lot of what you used to hear about, is mindset. Which is one of the funny things is with the cult of entrepreneurship. So yeah, we'll switch gears to this maybe because this is interesting. The cult of entrepreneurship is very action focused. You do this and do this and do this. It's the whole trope of like, you know, I'm a millionaire and I woke up at 2 o'clock this morning and I took a coffee enema with broccoli pieces and then, whatever it is. But it's very action orientated, but it's still it yeah, why is that bullshit? Let me ask you because I haven't processed through that. We know it is because we make fun of it because it's like just
Part of it is that if you're hearing people talk about it, they're selling you something.
yeah.
That's really it. That's really what it is. I mean, because again, I'll go back to once you reach the level of mastery, let's call it the highest echelon of what you're trying to achieve, or at least as high as you personally can or want to achieve. If you've reached that, you start to pierce the veil, you start to see things for what they are. And again, you start to realize how utterly simple and quite boring most of it is. And so
Yeah.
if people are talking so much about it, they probably need you to pay attention. So they're throwing the tropes at you because it's what millionaires do, right? Like if I say, list 5 things that millionaires do, you probably know they wake up at 4 in the morning, they take cold showers, they exercise, before anything else. They probably meditate, those types of things. Do all of them do that? No, no, they don't.
And did they do that to become successful? In most cases, no.
Correct. I actually have a thing about that too. So, whether this is the first time someone's listening or they know who I am at this point, I'm a classical musician. I went to school for music. I've taken a lot of master classes with professional, like world class musicians. A lot of them at the level they're at now, top of their career or past the top of their career, talk about how little work you should do as far as don't kill yourself every day, don't suffer burnout, don't, you should maybe only practice, 2 to 3 hours, not 6 hours. But the thing is, it's almost hypocritical. It's either a new perspective that a lot of people haven't gotten to yet, or it's a bit of hypocritical bullshit because, the people that I know about who are in the highest levels of their career practiced like psychopaths early on. You know, they've developed their skills to the point of like detriment to other parts of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
The principal trombone player of the New York Philharmonic, his name is Joe Alessi, and he is widely regarded as one of the best brass musicians on the planet. Like it's almost undisputed. He's, list the top 5 trombone players, he's always in the top 3. Like,
To be fair, if you ask anybody list the top 5 trombone players, they won't name one.
They won't name one.
Moving
But I'm
on.
just saying, and all aspects of life have this list, right? You could list the top 10 quarterbacks, and there's probably 3 that come to mind that are always going to be vying for, gold through bronze. And it's a matter of opinion and all that kind of stuff. But this guy is undisputably really fucking good at his thing. He went to Curtis, which is a major music school. The joke about Curtis is that nobody graduates because they all win auditions. They all get jobs before they graduate school. So I've heard it said in interviews with this guy that he barely passed his classes. Like he was not a good graded student. He got D's and stuff because he skipped class most of the time to do his thing, to practice and to go take auditions and things like that. So for him to tell his students like, oh, you should really only be practicing like a couple hours a day, don't go too hard, all that kind of stuff, it's almost hypocritical because he's in the high spot. He's in his ivory tower now.
Yeah, and that's with all of them. It was.
Yeah.
I thought about this just a little bit ago. It's we're getting advice from outliers.
Mm-hmm. Not a good place to get advice.
Yeah, and the trouble is there's now a medium, or there's mediums for a lot of outliers to make content. So you think there's lots of people like this, but it's not a lot of people. They're fucking freaks. That's not a bad thing. It's just when a freak is giving you advice for how it worked to be a freak, either one, they know they're a freak and they're giving you advice that isn't what they did. Or two, when they give you advice, it sounds fucking freakish. Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are the two, ironically, billionaires, and both of them were like, "Yeah, I was a fucking madman." And in Elon's case, he's still fucking psycho.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a story. Yasha Heifetz. A lot of people will know that name without knowing who it is, but he was a world-renowned violin soloist. One of the greatest violinists of all time. And a fan of his, after one of his recitals, came up, and he said to him, "Maestro, I would give my life to play like you do." To which Heifetz quietly responds, "I have." Like that's the answer. That's it. Like you don't live a normal life if you want to really, really, really succeed at your craft. There's no stay-at-home moms who I started a little Etsy business and oh, I'm a billionaire. No, that's not.
Have you heard of this runaway success called Harry Potter?
I've been called Harry Potter many times in my life. Yes. Yeah, exactly. She wrote the fucking thing as a waitress on napkins, but like she was hell bent on creating this world, mostly as a form of therapy for herself because she did
Mm.
not live a good life before Rowling was Rowling, as we know her. She did not live a good life.
I thought she was a mother when she wrote the first book, though. No?
A single mother for a reason.
Yes.
Yeah, like
So
she lived a hard life. Maybe not harder than some, but
and,
probably a lot that some would not be enviable of.
and people can say what they want about this, like all the rails against the Harry Potter series is what makes it good, unfortunately. It's simple, it's familiar, like it's just these little twists. Like,
It has a certain perspective that a lot of people don't agree with when you read between the lines, but
well,
let's not get into that.
yeah.
Yeah. I love Harry Potter, but I do also recognize some of the things people are saying about it. I see it.
Well, in contrast, there's the Earthsea series, which I'm reading through, which some of the quotes, I don't know how they don't show up with all the self development stuff. Some of the quotes in there are fucking wild.
Yeah.
But reading the books is unbearable because I read one where it's like the windy wind blew, and I was like, so the
In the
dialogue,
100-acre wood. Yeah.
the dialogue's incredible, but some of the other pieces, like it's just so much fluff. Where Harry Potter is just boom, 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 boom. Like it's so easy to read, it's so easy to follow, but
Exactly.
you don't get a lot out of it.
Right.
The Chosen Orphan, never heard that story before.
Never once. Noah. Yeah. Or no, Moses. That's the one.
Mm-hmm.
Got my chosen orphans mixed up.
Now we need one before him. Either way, moving on. Getting
Right.
off track. Okay, but so here's the thing. Okay, so yes, most of the advice is the outliers giving advice they think or they know is what people want to hear. So they either think it makes sense for regular people or they're, like you said, selling something.
Or stuff that made their life easier after they did all that hard work.
Yes, yes. Um, so then in contrast, like, okay, on the one hand, this is why I have my beef with the whole cult of entrepreneurship is like most people aren't that. They're not that kind of person. It won't work for them. It's it's dumb, right? Where it's this
Mm-hmm.
concept of like everyone can and should be entrepreneurs. No, it takes a certain person. It's a small percentage. Um, but so then, what is the self development stuff? How do people achieve success, or how do people develop? Um, outside of that, what is the actual way that the average person or regular people, like what's the kind of advice and things that they can do if that's not where we're looking?
I would argue it's the two words know thyself. That's the goal. That's both the end goal and the starting point. In that you need to take a look at yourself, see what you like, see what you don't like, see what you're good at, see if you want to do more of what you're good at. Because it really is about finding a role that you would like to fill. Because we don't exist in
Hmm.
a vacuum. We don't exist in a vacuum. So if you feel validation for what you do, you tend to like doing it and you tend to want to do better at it. We get addicted to validation, and some people get like drug addicted to validation where they'll
Yeah,
do anything.
yeah. I think that's one of the contrasts with the self-development style of the outliers is that they're very individualistic, and
Hmm.
the average person would be better off finding a community they find purpose in versus a individualistic purpose.
Absolutely. I know many people who in 2023 still want to become teachers. And I quite frankly don't understand why, because I am a teacher, but I'm not a teacher in the sense of I work for a school district like full time, I show up every day, that kind of stuff. I'm a teacher in the outlier, in the not outlier, but satellite sense. I
Hmm.
work with schools, not necessarily for them.
You're an on-campus tutor. I like that.
Essentially,
I like that terminology for it.
that's truly the best way to put it. And most of the teachers and ex-teachers that I've spoken to, I don't understand why anyone wants to do that job. It is super rewarding, I can tell you, working with kids and helping them develop themselves and being a mentor in that way. It's one of the most rewarding things in the world, but
But do you do things in spite of your position?
it's
The
true.
the
Yeah.
job you're paid for, the thing that's like, here's your job responsibilities. Those aren't where the magic happens. It's the little bit of space you get outside of that, or when you bend outside of that,
Hmm.
that the magic moments happen.
Right. And that must be enough. Or, think of salespeople, like full-time, more or less sales folks. It's mostly no's. It is mostly no's. Stop calling, fuck you and everything you stand for. It's a lot of negativity. But you get your commission and it feels a lot better. You get a few yeses, you get a couple yeses, get your commission. It's validating. Like a yes is a yes, it's validating, and you get a literal reward from it as well through your
Hmm.
money. So a lot of people, hype up the sales career. It's definitely a career of extremes. And you can attest to that more than I can. You've been an actual salesperson.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like the people that do best are people that just don't care, right? Where it's like they know it's a numbers game. They're not concerned with anything other than just playing the odds, and
Hmm.
they just keep playing because the cost is only your psyche. So, but they're built in such a way that it doesn't hurt their psyche as much to get rejection or to think about like, well, what am I selling? What is this doing? They don't think about that. They think just, I just keep going, and I will get a yes.
Hmm.
So they just make it faster and faster and faster to those yeses because they're not concerned about the other details.
And there's a lesson to be taken from that, because that is the way, in anything. It might not be in sales, it might not be interacting with people, because that's usually a rub for a lot of folks. I have a hard time with that because I want people to like me. And inherently, salespeople already have people have an edge when, as soon as you realize you're talking to someone in sales, you start to like put the guard up.
You start to put the guard up because they are very popular in social situations because they have that confidence.
Right.
So when you put them in a social setting outside of their job, they still tend to be the life of the party because they're just able to bring energy to the group without reservation.
Sure. And that's so important to take away from. Like, you can't force someone who's not like that to do it. They can do it, but it usually comes at a higher cost.
Hmm.
You know, to an extrovert, it costs pennies. To an introvert, you're spending dollars,
Yeah.
to try and make that happen. Uh, and that's important to recognize in yourself, because it really is to know how you operate, know what you'd want to change, because what you want to change is what you start to train, and therefore starts the wheel turning. And you want that wheel to keep turning.
Okay, so then what would be from the self development sphere? Because you hear people say like find your purpose or know thyself and that type of stuff. There's actually not a lot of practical advice on how to do that.
True. Okay. I have given a lot of thought about this kind of stuff. And a lot of it does come down to how much time have you actually thought about yourself? Like, as a mental exercise, as a fun thought experiment, like, how much time have you spent objectifying your life? Just looking at it from the outside in. Because a lot of people don't tend to do that. Who observes the observer? How much time have you spent actually observing yourself in life?
Hmm.
Because if you think of it like that, if you think of your life, if you're watching the TV show, the movie of your life, what parts do you like? What parts do you not like? You can easily watch a movie
Yeah.
and decide what you like and don't like about it.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the pieces I got from some random self development thing, where it's, like, watch your life like it's like play your life like it's a movie, because the key thing there is, what do you do when no one's watching, when no other humans watching? Imagine there's
Hmm.
still a camera on you, and you're the one watching that movie. What are you
Hmm.
going to do in that scene? That's, that was one of the big things for me. Um, this partly relates. This is why we need to be more structured, because we covered actual things that were ugly. We didn't cover the concept of ugliness in the episode. But the reason that's so hard is to objectively look at your life as this weird dichotomy of, because I've done this a lot over the past, few years for myself, of, it's very upsetting, but also, if you when you can get to some kind of acceptance point, um no one's the thing is, like, no one says you have to do anything. So when you can kind of get to the point where it's like, well, I'm just going to live my life without even putting on yourself, like, well, I need to do this, I need to do that. You just live to live
Hmm.
as you are. Then when you look at it again from that objective perspective, it's like, seems fine. But the first time you look at it and you're like, well, this looks like shit, because you're looking at it through a bunch of subjective lenses, even though you're trying to, like, step outside yourself. Like, well, I'm not here, I'm not doing this, or whatever it is.
Here's a concrete exercise to get you started. Take your phone. If you have Snapchat, record a video of yourself reading out of a book or a magazine. Read a paragraph, read a sentence. Don't send it to anyone. Just then rewatch it. We tend to record a video and not necessarily watch the whole thing. We just send it away. If it's a Snapchat,
Hmm.
TikToks might be different. If you're a content creator, you've probably experienced this, but a lot of people aren't. If you're just a consumer who wants to try and develop themselves and a sense of themselves a little better, record yourself doing something, reading something. You will hate the sound of your voice. You will see things you've never seen in yourself before. I just watched a video of you and I, Michael, yesterday. It was our balance video. And I notice weird things that I do that I don't really realize I'm doing. A lot of it, and it's stuff you don't recognize. Like I bite my lip a lot when I'm just listening or hanging out, or I laugh at the end of sentences because I just think everything's absurd, and I do that a lot. You've probably
Uh,
noticed.
yeah, yeah. And then we we kept getting worse with, what was the fucking phrase? I beat it out of myself after I listened through all the episodes again.
It's tricky.
Oh, it's tricky. God, it got worse as the episodes went on.
But that's it. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. Is you start to recognize some of these things, and you feel a lot better because you know you're on the path of developing it, and then you see how bad it really is, and it goes. Whoop. But that's supposed to happen statistically. That's how the Dunning-Kruger effect works. That's what the Dunning-Kruger effect is. You start something, you feel really good about it because you're finally, you know, you get newbie gains. You're finally breaching the subject and really learning about it. And then you learn how much of the subject there is, and your confidence goes whoop.
Mhm.
And then that's where the real at the bottom is where you actually start to develop mastery of the subject.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the critical things that, it's obvious why in any short form content it doesn't come up. But even, I mean, I've read front to back, I think, two Tony Robbins books, and he doesn't actually talk about it in either of the ones I've read. Um, but it back to my kind of anecdote about, like, I don't always feel good about, the discipline. I don't always want, quote unquote, to do it. Um, People try and ride that excitement, because they're like, oh, I'm gonna do what makes me feel good. I'm gonna do what makes me happy. And then when it starts sucking, they stop, not realizing like you have to push through that to get to the next level. Um, but so much of the modern narrative of self development, self love, and all the subjectivity stuff is, well, if it doesn't feel good, then don't do it. It's like you're never gonna get to that next level because there's going to be a point where it's challenging you, and that
Hmm.
challenge is not going to feel good unless, back to the mindset thing, you have ingrained the perspective that the challenge is good.
Yes, and that's just it. Part of knowing yourself is knowing just when it's uncomfortable versus when it's actually painful.
Mm,
Because you don't want to cause yourself harm in the name of progression. So let's take the sales example again. So you're a new salesman, and you have a list of calls to make, and you start doing it, and it's uncomfortable. You know, you make mistakes, you're aware that you make mistakes. It's the Dunning Kruger effect. You're good with people. Like you're a people person, you like talking to folks, you got no problem being on the phone all the time. Cool. So you breach that little part of it and you feel pretty confident and good about it. You get into this subject matter, you start doing the calls, you run into the tough spots. You realize, oh my God, my colleagues that have been here 5+ years must be made of steel. And you see how much of sales there really is, or how much of being a salesman there actually is, how much there is to it. Now, you decide, okay, well, I'm going to be like that. I'm going to do what it takes to be a great salesman. And you stay uncomfortable. You recognize that it's going to be uncomfortable. You make the mistakes. You pick yourself up. You try to word things better. You tweak as you go, that kind of stuff. It's still always a little uncomfortable, but you start to get better at it and the pain eventually subsides. That's the good option. We want that. If we go back to the decision of, okay, I'm going to be a great salesman, and the farther you go, the more you drug yourself and drink at the end of every night, contemplate dark thoughts because this is hard, but you've decided you're going to do it, and no matter what, you're going to do it. That's a cause of concern for yourself. You might need to pivot at that point.
mhm.
Know when to quit and know why it is. Not just because it's uncomfortable. That's not right. If it's painful,
Mm.
that is probably, and I mean actual pain, because
Well,
most people talk about pain as if it's just uncomfortable. No, like if it's damaging you.
I'm not going to use that phrase, but it's when you say that. I'm talking about the catchphrase we had because this would be a perfect time to say that catchphrase.
Mhm.
Um,
There's nuance to what I'm saying. I'm simplifying it quite a bit, but
yeah, but the
yeah.
when you try to say, if I was asked the question, well, how do you know the difference? There is no concrete answer to that. There's
Everyone's line in the sand is in different places for different things.
and there's no, again, there is no hard and fast way to know that, even with yourself, even with other people. Your example was probably the closest I've heard somebody say, where if you basically have to um, escape or numb in order to maintain it, it probably isn't the thing. Um,
Hmm.
but the trouble is, it's like, okay, but that's, if you're pushing in out of your comfort zone, you will need time to decompress. So now you have to separate what is escapism from decompression. Um, and one of my favorite things I ever learned from self development was from the pickup artist sphere, from the mystery method. So one of the
Sure.
earliest things. Um, but it was kind of his Dale Carnegie, like, well, you have to talk to people. Um, he's kind of talking about like people watched him because you could watch live videos of him and it
Hmm.
seemed like fucking magic. And he had all these like tips and tricks and stuff like that. But at one point, he's like, the secret is calibration. He's like, that's the most important thing, and and that's why it's important to go out and talk to women, right? That was the whole point. It's like you have to learn to calibrate, and what he meant by that is you have to get a sense for it. But you get the sense for it by doing it. So you have to go out, and your goal is to get good at calibrating. So your goal isn't to, meet somebody and take them home tonight. Your goal is to go out there and be able to sense between somebody, you know, is this conversation going well? Am I comfortable here? Are they comfortable? But you can't, there's no way to know that without learning to sense it. And you build that sense like a muscle. And I realized after learning that concept that that works in so many different places, that it's the secret is to understand that you need to learn to calibrate, and you learn to calibrate by this like intersection of doing the action and then like being present in your experience of it. So the reflection and the action together is how you calibrate. But there's no other way, um, when it comes to anything that deals with the human experience. So whether it's yourself trying to figure out what it is, or if you're like in sales, it's the same type of thing, or dating sphere, or um, doing speeches or teaching. Um, the calibration is the most important part, and you can only learn that by being both in the action step and being aware of yourself enough to like feel it, which being aware makes it harder. That's the trick, because when you're aware of it, you feel how uncomfortable it is, you feel the nuances of it more. But that's like, if I was going to teach anybody like how to do anything, calibration is one of the biggest things. Learn the concept of calibration, like when you're sitting. So we'll use the fitness example because it's a little bit outside of the human thing. um, you have to learn where that switches in your mind to like, "Ugh, I'm tired, I don't want to do this." You have to find where in your mind is the switch for the discipline, because it's in there, but you have to do it, and you have to be okay with just fucking off a couple times. But when you when you don't feel like it and you still get up and go, what did it feel like? And not only what did it feel like, how did you get to that spot? That to me is like how calibration fits into all these other things. And that's like the most critical thing I think in any self-development, is learning to calibrate yourself and learning what that looks and feels like. Big rant, but
No, no, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And it really is, I'm starting to think of, I like to, as a teacher, as a mentor, I like to give names to things just to try and give, and they're usually silly names to like a topic or an exercise, just so people can call it something and know what it is without the whole process.
Mhm.
And we could use alliteration in all of this. We have C's. You need consciousness. You need to know yourself and be aware of yourself. We have calibration, and consistency is probably the other big, big ingredient
Mhm.
in this whole thing. So know yourself. You got to do the thing a lot, routinely,
Yeah.
consistently. And then as you do it, you're tweaking, you're learning the alchemy of it all. And that is the calibration of it. And it's an upward cycle. You repeat, you rinse, lather, repeat, and do it a little bit better every time. And oftentimes, I read a book called "Don't Shoot the Dog." Very interesting book, and it's about how mammals learn. It was written by someone who had trained dolphins, and she took another gig, training dogs professionally, and wrote this book about how, yeah, mammals are mammals, and guess what we are,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. And so we're not that far off from learning the same way any other mammals do. We can just think about it more rather than react to it all the time. But the biggest thing is, in learning something, one of the best things you can do, and this is a concrete piece of advice for anyone out there wanting to develop a skill or a habit, is Most skills are umbrella topics of a bunch of fundamentals. It's learning the fundamentals well and knowing that the whole is made of parts and you can work on the parts to enhance the whole. You don't have to just try and hammer away the whole all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The way I talk with my students is you're fixing an engine. You don't have to know anything about cars, but you're fixing an engine. You open the hood, something doesn't sound right. You take out the piece that you think needs work. They don't dismantle the whole engine and put it back together. You take out the piece that needs work. You tweak that, put it back in, test the engine. Is the squeak gone? That was probably good. Let's move on to something else. Is the squeak still there? Is the squeak different? Right? It's a lot of observation, a lot of tweaking, and testing. So
Mm-hmm.
you do it consistently with an observational mindset. So you need consciousness, you need consistency with consciousness, and calibration is the actual doing of the
This
tweaks.
actually brings up one of the biggest throwaway things that people talk about in the self-development thing is the 10,000 hours. The study
Right.
for that it isn't 10,000 hours of a thing. It's 10,000 hours of concentrated effort.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where people miss it, is that it's not you just do a thing for 10,000 hours. It's that you are focused on the experience of the thing for 10,000 hours.
We've spent 10,000 hours pissing into toilets as men, but how much time have you actually practiced doing that, besides potty training?
Yeah.
So you've spent maybe, peeing doesn't take that long. So you've spent maybe 2 hours as a child of concentrated practice, mental effort into doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
And you stop there. Like it's a silly example, but
My
tell
my
me I'm wrong.
my favorite example, because I've had to re-experience this a couple times, is video games. Because I had one of my earliest self-development experiences with video games. Because when online games first came out, there was people that were just exceptionally good. And this is before hacking was even common, so it wasn't like, oh, they're hacking. Like that wasn't even a thing early on,
Mm-hmm.
because it was so rare. It's like these people are just so good. And I was like, there has to be a way to do it. That was my whole thing. It's like if they can do it, they're doing something. So I just hyper focused on, if I was being beaten, what was it that they were doing, and if I was doing good, hyper focused on, okay, what was I doing, um, and I got to the point where I first with Halo, and then I switched games to Call of Duty and had the same learning curve. So this is the thing where, like, I started Call of Duty. Sure, I had the first person shooter experience, but the dynamics were different enough that, like, I got stomped. I went from people screaming in their mic that I was hacking, and I knew I wasn't. I knew I was just that damn good, to another game where I was trash, other than
Mm-hmm.
the fact that I just knew how to play the general mechanisms. But then I got up to the same level where I was so good that people, like, I could hear it on the mic. People were like, you couldn't do that. That's impossible. And, like, it's not. It's just, it seems like magic to you, which is exactly how magic works. Magicians just practice with that concentrated effort. Um, but I've switched, so many games, and every once in a while I'll, like, or with games like League of Legends, um, like, I've got one character I'm fucking phenomenal with, and I'll go to do a new character. I'm like, oh, I don't like this character. I'm not good with them. I have to, like, remind myself, no, like, some of these characters, no, they're just not my, like, vibe for a character. But some of them I just need to suck at, and while I'm sucking, learn how to get good. And I have to keep reminding myself that. So ironically, for me, video games was one of those places that I really learned kind of about that curve of the concentrated effort, um, and got to see the results of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is a universal formula, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So any skill or habit you want to develop, that's how it works. Period.
Yeah, because the 10,000 hour study was focused actually on music, on
Mm-hmm.
classical music.
Mm-hmm. It's an easy thing to study because it's in schools. So it's concentrated groups of people. You already have a sample size, and that's the point, is they are practicing. And, everyone's there, the same amount of hours in a day, roughly the same course load. the same instruments. They're all playing relatively equal quality instruments, depending on who you ask. But there's still vastly different talent levels.
Mhm.
And that's the question. They saw, well, all things being relatively equal, why is the talent level so dispersed?
But to the point you just made about the pulling out the one part of the engine, in the actual study, um, the top musicians on the planet, the way they practice wasn't full pieces. So they'd play a piece, and when they got to a spot where they messed up, they would stop and then play just that piece over and over and over and over again, get it down, and then they'd play the full piece again. And if they messed up, it's not that piece that's bad, it's the transition. So then they would play the full piece over and over. But if they messed up at a spot, they would just not play anything else. And then in order to get to the next level, they would play the whole song out of order. So they, again, the whole point was to get good at the parts and then get good at bringing it together.
That's exactly right. And it's because they know themselves as players. I have in my possession, uh, this is the fourth volume of my practice journal.
So
Yeah,
official.
it's a lot. And I have in here from my master's recital in 2017. It is you can't see it very well, but I have all the pieces. And what I do is I broke them into chunks. So measures 1 through 7, 8 through 11, 12 through 16, all that kind of stuff in little chunks like that. So I broke them up that way. And then I numbered them by the ranking of difficulty level to me.
Hmm.
So if I look at a piece of music and that's like, well, I can play those 4 bars. I can sight read those 4 bars. I don't need to practice that much. That went very low on the list. Some stuff I didn't practice until the week of the recital because I could already play it. I
Mhm.
just had to make sure it all flowed in the music. Some parts were super technically or artistically demanding. So I had to practice those for longer with more concentration. So those got more hours of concentrated practice than stuff I was already fundamentally good at. My fundamentals could cover playing that music. So it really is, and that takes a lot of maturity in knowing yourself, being very honest, not brutal, but honest of I can play that. I can play that with a little work. I can play that with a lot of work. That's outside of my abilities right now.
But
Like
then,
to
but
know
then,
that stuff.
then pull them out, right? Don't try and do the whole thing together. So,
Correct. There was, yeah, some of the run throughs. I didn't peak until like the week before or the week of the performance. Like I
mhm.
wasn't playing full run throughs until like right before.
But so an example with like the dating thing, right? So it's like, okay, if what you're having trouble with is, it doesn't matter what you're having trouble with, but we'll use the easiest example because it's the part that most guys have trouble with, and this is where most good dating coach systems start with, is the approach, right?
Sure. You start at
Eh,
the beginning. Yeah.
But a lot of people are like, oh well, what am I going to say? It's like, don't, like, when you're practicing approaching, don't say anything else. Walk up and be like, hey, like, I hope you have a good day, and then walk away. Do that 100 fucking times, and then add a sentence like, I hope you have a great day. Actually, like, what's your name, right? Like, add just one part. You have to break into parts. If it's like, oh, I'm going to walk up to this person and try to get a whole interaction out of it, it will just devastate you. But when you break them into little parts, it's way different.
Hmm.
Um, oh, I had one other example of like another area that
Yeah.
that works
No,
in.
I've heard of if you are trying to do the approach, ask what time it is. Hold up your dark phone. Don't turn your phone on. Just hold up your dark phone. Be like, sorry, my phone died. What time is it? Like, you know,
Oh boy, now we're using props.
yeah. Whatever helps. But either way, you start. I think it's a Teddy Roosevelt quote. I'm going to paraphrase because I don't know the exact wording, but you do what you can with what you have where you are right now.
Yeah, there's actually the negative version of that is one of the classic Jewish concepts. I had a friend, ironically in sales, that always, like, it was one of his big mottos of, I don't remember what the order is, but if not who, like, if not when, and the answer is, it's you now, right? Like,
Oh, if not now, then when? If not you, then who?
mhm.
Yeah, that kind of
um,
stuff.
yeah, I thought we were gonna talk a lot more about the pop culture stuff with the self development.
Well, it takes so much. We're kind of trying to bypass that because clearly the pop culture stuff is
It's
they're
all
just
right.
trying to they're trying to sell you something. A
Yeah.
lot of them have grains of truth and a lot of them have good useful tactics, but you kind of have to synthesize all of it to your personal.
Well, we're shooting ourselves in the foot, right? Because like that content's out there, and most people know how they feel about it, right? Like they listen to it and they think this is kind of bullshit, right? So a lot of the stuff we could make comments on, most people are thinking, which would be good for us, right? Because it's like, yeah, I agree. Like it would help our content then that way. The trouble is with our project, we're trying to like find answers, not always solutions, but answers. So we're immediately on the, we both studied this stuff for fucking years. So it's like, okay, what actually worked? What have we done? What have we learned that actually got results? Because we have both spent, that's how we bonded. I was thinking about that before I got on this episode. Because I did like a little warm up thing with myself. I was like, that was the thing that we as people bonded on first, because we seemed very different at first, and then we talked about some self-development thing and then just went off together on like all these different things.
Right, and we work so well as friends and colleagues because we have a similar heart but different minds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And it is, and so much of it is, it's funny you mention like the pickup community. I actually have a quote from Neil Strauss, who was, what was
uh
his name?
was it style?
Yeah, his was Style. Yeah, and it's over there. I'm not gonna be able to get to it with my headphones, but it's something, I'm gonna paraphrase. It's something along the lines of the trick to real change isn't so much the individual spark and drive, but about positive community.
Yes,
And
and that's back.
that's one of my favorite sayings is it takes a village to raise a child.
And
And yes, it means literally raise a kid, but also like anything you want to do.
yeah, and back to the like a lot of the self-development content is outliers pitching shit, so it's just not relevant to most people. What most people need when they, when you're like, oh, find a purpose or find meaning or whatever it is, they would be better off not doing that individualistically. um, because part of things, it doesn't have to be, everyone that's against capitalism can get excited about this, but it doesn't have to be a fucking job or a career. I've been listening to a Warhammer podcast. Like that's their fucking thing. Like it becomes very obvious as you listen to it. They all have jobs and lives, but what they fucking do, who they are, their purpose, their meaning comes from fucking Warhammer, and not in just a nerdy sense, but in like that's where the community is. So being a good member of that community is what's important to them. So everything in their life is, you know, I need to be good in every other area, not even good, just myself in every area, and then bring my as much of myself as I can to this community. And I feel like for the average person, if they target their self development within a community structure, not only do you get the support, which is kind of what you were saying, is like the best way to develop is with people. Um, you hear a lot about that in the entrepreneurial outlier stuff about mentors, which is true. It's one of those grains of things that's, you can get a good mentor, it will expedite things so fast. Um, but a mentor is just a concentrated community, right? So it's still, that's the secret that seems to get missed with all this individualistic approach to self development. That's just not a good way for most people to do it.
Precisely, yeah. And a community can be as small as two people.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be like the village or, your whole department. It doesn't have to be a class of people. No, it can just be you and your mentor, or you and a friend who have the same goals, or even you and a friend who have different goals, but still support each other and challenge each other.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it takes to keep the wheel rolling is what you need, and whoever it takes to keep the wheel rolling. Now, part of that is also learning when and how to say no to certain things and people. I struggle with this personally. You can't have it all. You can't have it all. That's the Yasha Heifetz thing. Oh, Maestro, I would give my life to play like you do. My boy, I have.
Mhm.
Like, it's just that if you want something that bad, other things have to get sacrificed or not happen.
But sacrifice is a good word. I think some people maybe don't like that terminology, but man, is it an accurate and emotional word for it. You have to be willing to sacrifice things.
Yeah. And
That's
let's like
just,
define for me in esoteric terms what a sacrifice really is.
oh, I mean, in esoteric terms, it's just the fact that I know he gets all the heat these days, and to be fair, some of the content Jordan Peterson's put out has been cringe. But when he talks about the metaphor of the sacrifice, like that shows up everywhere. And in ancient religions, they did ritual sacrifice. The important part wasn't ever the killing of the human, the actual killing of the animal. It was the story behind it. It's just humans used to be more dramatic, we'll say. Um, but if you want to catch the animal, you have to sacrifice your comfortability. You have to sacrifice time with your family. You have to sacrifice time fucking off and telling stories, whatever it is. But the to achieve anything as a human, you have to sacrifice. That's just built in. It's part of the game. So, like you said, you can't have it all. No, you have to be willing to sacrifice things. And this is the one of the best self development books. Um, the subtle art of not giving a fuck is literally that. The whole book is just about the metaphor of sacrifice. It's learn what to sacrifice and learn what you won't sacrifice. Maybe if we're talking about like knowing thyself, learn that. Learn what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're not. And there's going to be things that you don't want to sacrifice, but you could, versus things that,
Ooh, yeah.
you won't.
Challengers. You have to challenge yourself. And that's what people talk about when you have to ask the hard questions. That's just it. It's going, okay, I what's one of the hardest ones? Leaving a job you're already in sometimes, the security of the job, that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. Uh Leaving somebody. That's one of the hardest ones. But if you really want the life you're thinking of and the person you're around isn't part of that, they're stopping you
Oh,
from doing it or
it's
whatever.
ironically, it's so much worse with communities. I have a term, proximity friends, because I've seen it so much where people grew up in school together or they were in work together.
Hmm.
They're like, "Oh, we're friends." It's like, no, you're not. Like when you hear people talk about the relationships with them, it's like the only thing you two are gaining is commiserating together or reminiscing together, but you're not
Hmm.
growing together. Um, you became friends only because of proximity, not interest, not vibe, none of that stuff. Um, so, ironically, in order to find the right community, you have to be willing to sacrifice a current community. And that's
Yeah.
where I think most people have troubles. They get some kind of community that isn't the one that they need or want, um, and they're not willing to give that up. And then yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing. And then, especially when you do get to the points where you do need to make the individualistic choices, because you don't sacrifice who you are as an individual. That'd be one of the key things. Don't sacrifice who you are as an individual for the community. Um, find a community where you can be the individual you are.
America. Just had a little tear down my face. Yeah. It's the America we want, really, though. But that's absolutely true. And I think of, for the weebs out there, it's equivalent exchange. It's the law of equivalent exchange. You must.
I've gone down that rabbit hole metaphorically and metaphysically like real hard before.
Yeah. No, you want a fit body, you must sacrifice eating cupcakes. You want a you want to become a master woodworker, you got to give up your evenings, go to the shop. Like it's really a lot of that. It's you must, and sacrifice is the word. You have to give something to what you want.
Mhm.
Nothing's free. Sorry.
Yeah.
uh, and there is you mentioned humans being having a flair for the dramatic, and that's been true throughout all of history. I love it. There's one. It's on my reading list, and unfortunately, I can't remember the author or the name of the book, but I can tell you about it. And it's an author who, some years ago, decided to hold a Viking funeral for himself. Not like himself physically, but like his self that he didn't like, all the aspects of his life
Okay.
that he wanted to get rid of. He built it was small, but he built like a wooden Viking ship, out of, I think he made it out of paper, or, he stylized Viking ship out of some material. And he put in representations of himself that he had wished to sacrifice for a better him, you know.
Hmm.
And that's a very Nordic concept. Odin did that. For anyone familiar with the runes, and all the weight that they hold in Nordic philosophy, and especially New Age Nordic stuff, Odin discovered them by hanging himself for 9 days and nights on a tree. Some say it's the tree of life, but either way, and the terminology used is that he sacrificed himself to himself,
Hmm. Or yeah,
and
and,
in that he gained knowledge, which is his whole deal. But yeah, this author decided, he put in representations of his life that he didn't want anymore, that he wanted to release, and he set it aflame. And in the flames, that's the metaphor of the phoenix as well. In the flames, you are born anew
mhm.
and can start over, quote unquote. You kind of need to do that, you know. It can be as dramatic as you want.
You can get caught up in the drama too.
Yeah, that's the thing. You must have your, like, you must know thyself. If you're making it about the drama, you're missing the point.
Hmm. Although, out of the mistakes you can make, if you're over dramatizing but moving forward, that's a better path than under dramatizing and not doing, which is the
Yes.
big pro with religion, ritual, and pomp. That part of the things that humans are missing is just good narrative of life
Yep.
drama. We have all this drama in entertainment and in music and all this shit, but we don't have drama. Not in the, oh, did you hear what she did yesterday kind of drama. No, like the drama of um
Intense emotional attachment, or,
or like a bigger
feeling.
than life story integrated in. It's one of the things that I passionately have been work as a philosopher. I've been working on trying to figure out how to bring more of that into like everyday life for people, where it's more modern. Because all the religions can function in that way, but it does feel like there's time for something new. Um,
Sure.
but figuring that out is hard. But that's one of the big things that's missing from the people that aren't. One of the reasons conservatives are the way they are, even in, people don't think of like a Hindu person as a conservative, because in the West, conservative is Judeo-Christian. Um, but if you hear about current events in India, they don't like Muslims because they're conservatively Hindu or Hindi.
Right.
Um, but it's the same thing of that kind of, one of the reasons people hold to that is because that narrative can be so powerful for people. Um, it's one of the reasons I've always liked the Western esoteric magic systems, is because it's chaos magic is the most westernized, but you can kind of just do almost like generically symbolic things, where it's like, the religious part's not important. What's important is the symbolisms and the ritual. So take the religion out of it, just do the ritual and symbol parts of it. um,
Yeah, and a great example of that, I grew up Catholic. A great example of that is praying on the rosary.
mhm,
The rosary is just prayer beads. It's meant for meditation. It's guided meditation.
mhm.
That's it. You meditate on the life and teachings of Christ and what he went through and what he taught. All good stuff. And it is like praying on the rosary is probably the most fundamentally Christian thing you could do that actually helps you interact with the world in a positive way. And it's exactly what you're speaking of. It just boils it down to that, and it's a nice ritual to do, and it doesn't have to be religious.
Which, tying it around, that's why the mindset self development stuff is popular, is because it usually tries to give you some of that. It's, I do really like the visualization practices. Um, I through experiment, so we're going to talk about it scientifically. It it just didn't have lasting results. But to be fair, Ziegler does the quote of uh, motivations like bathing, like we recommend it daily.
Yeah,
Um, but it can be really powerful to where you do the thing where you sit down in a chair and you imagine like a little door or window and you walk through it and you're in the space you want to be in the future, and you fully immerse yourself in it, and then you come back and some of that carries with into your sense of self. Like, I was there, me, I was that person that's there, so that person is also part of who I am now. Very, very powerful emotionally. I personally didn't feel like it always translated well to action, but that might be just a personal, like the way that I work. But a lot of that mindset stuff is trying to what's the term, a secular approach to that religious spiritual experience.
yeah, that makes sense. So you essentially just described, I guess, if I were a Zig Ziglar type and I wanted to try and like address an audience, I'd be like, okay, imagine you've just traveled 20 years in the future, 10 years in the future, traveled to the future as yourself. Describe that to me. And hopefully it's the measure of success and blah, blah, blah. I'm in the corner office of blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay. And then you're shot back to your present moment in this chair right now. But oh, this is the third Harry Potter book. Okay. He saw himself cast the Patronus to save
Mm-hmm.
himself. Yeah. Time travel gets wacky. But because he knows he did it, he knows he can do it. And he just had to get to the point where he had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things. And that's where visualization really helps. You kind of time travel a little bit in your head.
And for anybody who wants to practice it, the key thing is to douse yourself in the emotion by alternating between the feeling and the sense. Because it's like, it's like, oh yeah, I imagine him in office. It's like, well, what does the desk look like? What's the color of the desk? How do things smell? And as you breathe in, how does that feel? Like, you have to
Yeah.
you have to immerse yourself in it, because when you pull out, you lose a ton of it. So you have to really just, before you get dried off, whipping back to the current consciousness, you have to make sure you're soaked in that experience.
And I will add to that. That's exactly true. And I will add to that. Make sure it's the first person. You are behind your eyeballs.
Yes.
If you're watching it in a movie, it's somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's you, it's somebody else. You must be behind your eyeballs when you do it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's one of the most powerful things because your brain, this isn't even the woo woo, type of, it's not so much magic as we imagine it to be, but magic as it often is,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I've heard it described as spicy psychology, which I kind of like.
It's a good term for it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it really is. Your brain is an organ, so it operates a certain way, and it doesn't distinguish good imagination from reality.
Mm-hmm.
The more of your senses that you use in your imagination, the more your brain thinks it's real. That's why dreams can be so vivid, because we think it's real for that time. That's why the falling thing happens, that like you fall in a
Mm-hmm.
dream and you like wake up shocked. Your brain didn't know that was real until you woke up, or
And
that
to
wasn't real
and to use one of the
until you woke up.
classic self development tropes, but it's real. Top athletes, one of the ways they practice is they just watch themselves do it in their mind.
Mhm.
And they make it so that when they're watching it, they watch what the success looks like. But again, they don't just watch; they feel. So they're shooting the shot, but they're just sitting in a chair on a plane on their way to wherever the next game is, but they feel like where their arms are, where the muscle is, the ball rolling off their fingers. They're there practicing in their mind. And across the board in every sport and every skill set, that has been shown to help make you better.
Absolutely. There have been I wish I could do more concrete, like in this exact study by these scientists.
Yeah,
But
that's somebody
well,
else's job.
I just don't want to be well, I just don't want to be the source, trust me, bro guy. But
Don't trust us.
the
Go look it up.
thank you. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And if we're wrong, please tell us. Like really,
Oh,
please tell
I get
us.
corrected on the TikToks all the time because I referred to coffee as a narcotic.
But
Because I
it's a
know,
stimulant, you asshole. No.
yeah, and
I saw
mm-hmm,
that one.
mm-hmm. Because people think narcotics are illegal. They're not. However,
They're a classification.
it comes from the Greek word to numb, and I do love me some etymology. So unlikely the guy who made that comment's gonna watch the full video. But thank you, like honestly, thank you. Like I sometimes just talk shit to be corrected because part of our whole project is learning. And sometimes for me, the way I approach our project for learning is I'll say just bold ass shit, not because I think I'm right, but because I'm hoping somebody will come into the comments and like correct or enlighten or do like a more broad thing for it. And that was one of the perfect examples. The first comment I saw was actually the word comes from this, so you're wrong. You're right. You're right.
It takes a village.
Mhm.
But the study is essentially how visualization helps and what kind of visualization helps. So the study was done using different groups of, so one group, I think it was visualizing a
Mm,
presentation they had to give.
I there's been a couple studies like this, but I know what you're talking
Sure.
about. Yeah.
Yeah. So the studies are one group had to visualize preparing for it and kind of like they had to give themselves an 80s, good old 80s montage
Mhm.
of preparation for it, in their heads. The other group was visualizing actually giving the presentation. So not working up to it, but actually being in the room with the people, feeling the feelings. Because that's the biggest thing. You can prepare, you can have all the words, but as soon as you're in the environment, it's a different scenario. And our brains take that, and I took that personally. And our brains take that personally. It's a new environment. Musicians and theater folks run into this all the time. In the practice room, everything can be perfect. That's a practice room. That's a room. That's an environment. As soon as you're on stage, completely different environment. So you now have to take all those skills and apply it to a new place. That's why performing is so difficult.
And it's funny because it I was gonna say that like life's life specifically for humans seems to reward a trance state, which is true, but people can be in a negative trance, as it were. So if we're gonna just use words to distinguish, it's about being in a flow state, right? Because you could be in a trance where you're just doing the like for a play, right? You're just doing the lines, and somebody messes up, and if you're just in a trance, it can break your trance, or you move on and you don't adapt to it.
Mhm.
Um, so the
Both are equally weird
yeah,
to experience.
so
Yeah.
it's a flow, like to use better language with English. Trance is an accurate word for it because if you're in a proper trance, it's a flow. But because you could use trance in more the negative sense, where it's like somebody's in a trance where they go to work, they watch TV, but they're never engaging right. But the flow state, right? It's the whole concept of let me like pop it over, but it's the spoon. It's the whole concept of the stir thing is that life wants flow. Like the human brain responds to it, the external environment responds to it, that flow state. Um, and the smoother you make the actions for yourself, the easier it is to flow. Um, Trying to think of like, I mean, video games is a good example, right? Where, if you learn to do all the mechanisms, every game is a live game and you're like adapting. But like, if okay, they move here, I do this, it's not it's not a script, but it's improv. So you improv enough that like that
It's
happens.
play.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
play is what you're doing. Yeah.
fuck. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And that's so here's kind of bringing it back to self-development, and I speak mostly in the terms of skill development,
Hmm.
because there's different, maybe you do need to boost.
The definition is person's character or abilities, so character or
Right.
skill.
Right. And I will argue that developing your character can be applied skill based.
Hmm. Well, you are what you
So
do, right?
yeah, that's a big part of it.
Excellence
And
is
so
therefore a habit.
that Aristotle, I just know it was like plastered on one of those shitty posters in my high school. That's all I remember about that. I think it was an eagle flying over a mountain or something. I don't know.
Yeah, he would
But
he would be appalled at modern education.
most Greeks would be. So I'm going to add another C to my list of C's of self development. I want to get to 7 so it can be pirate themed. But but no, so we have in no particular order at this time: consistency, consciousness, calibration. We're going to add confidence. And
Mm,
confidence does want to come later, because with confidence means you can do it more. And here's the thing. So I'll add comfort, confidence and comfort. I want to call almost the same thing. I
mhm,
play the best as a musician when I'm comfortable, because we do not, the reason we love stories, especially about heroes, we love superheroes are huge right now. The reason we love superheroes is because they're not like us. They rise to the occasion. We normally, humans, we like to think we would. But truthfully speaking, we don't rise to the occasion. We fall to the level of our preparation.
mhm,
We fall to the level of our habits. And so we do best when we're comfortable or confident. And I find comfort not in relaxation so much as confidence is really the best way to put it. So I play the best when I know the stuff. I know it's in my wheelhouse. I used to fight in martial arts tournaments. I fought the best when I knew I was better, when I was comfortable with my body and how it moved and knowing what it could do and calibrating. So this really ties to it, because a fight is a good way to put this. The fight starts before they get in the ring.
mhm,
Usually they even in training they'll study the other opponent, and they know themselves and they know their opponent. And this is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It's literally one of the oldest tricks in the book, you know. And it does come down to, if you know, oh god, I'm just going to quote it, if you know yourself and know the enemy, you cannot lose. If you know yourself and you don't know the enemy, you probably won't lose. If you don't know yourself and don't know the enemy, you're probably going to lose.
mhm.
That's the whole thing. And that
Well,
goes with, and you don't need another person to be the quote unquote enemy,
mhm.
right? It's the doing of the task itself.
Well, and then like the fighting example, reaction time. If you have to think about it, it's slower. So what you do is you trust. That's yeah. So quick tangent with when I was doing a lot more dating coaching, and people were like, "Well, how to be confident? Be comfortable." It's like, "Oh, I'm uncomfortable." Then pretend to be comfortable, or do it until it's comfortable. That's what confidence is. Period. The word confidence can just be thrown out of everybody's usage. Never say the word confident again. What people mean is comfortable. And like you said, not in the relaxed sense. Relaxing is relaxing. Comfortable is the truest sense of confidence. But like in the fighting sense, if you have to like okay, the punch is coming, I need to move back, you might not move out of the way in time. But if you're there and the punch is coming and you just let your body do its thing, you be comfortable in the fight, be comfortable in like I know what I'm doing. So the punch comes, you just move. Like your brain has all these gears and processes to gauge that for you. But if you try and lead them, you it's going to be delayed. and that could be catastrophic.
Precisely, yeah. And you've reminded me of something I tell students and performers. I coach performers of all kinds. And the definition of confidence, like true confidence, is not believing that nothing will go wrong. It's not believing that you will make no mistakes. It is knowing that when things go wrong, you can handle it.
Mhm.
It's as simple as that. It's not making no mistakes. That's an illusion. That is setting yourself up for vast failure. But it's and that's where a lot of our neuroses come from, is the belief that we can't make mistakes. And a lot of that comes from traditional school systems of
Mhm.
you have to have the answer or die.
Yeah.
Like, you're not given a chance to explore to find the answer. It's have the answer.
Mhm.
And that's cancer on our society, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And but no, real confidence is knowing that when shit hits the fan, you know, you'll find some paper towel.
But if the shit's hit the fan 12 dozen times and you already have a stockpile of,
If it
of
gets in your mouth, it's time to bow out, right? Like
well, not even if it's gone in your mouth a couple times, you keep Listerine under the sink, right? Like that's the point. Is that when it happens, you're like, yeah, okay, I know what to do next.
yep, that's precisely it. Yeah. And in so much I help coach a state championship marching band, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a big to do. There's a lot of moving parts, quite literally a lot of moving
Yeah.
parts in that. And one of the biggest thing to try and help develop these young people in the performing arts of any kind is, yeah, that level of confidence where not making a mistake, but or not making no mistakes. I hate that kind of grammar. But it's not in lack of mistakes. It's in, if you do make one, being able to handle it, knowing you can handle it, not even knowing how to handle it. That's just having a strategy and a plan and a system, which you can be confident about.
Mm-hmm.
But the real seed, the real core of confidence is in knowing that you can handle what goes wrong, just as part of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, because Mike Tyson's famous line of everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Well,
And
and
that's so true.
well, and then so in the dating sphere, it's one of those things where it's like, oh well, if I don't get to such and such a point, if I don't get her number, like I failed. It's like, no, 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 that's the wrong way to look at it. You get good by that not being important. So you didn't
Yep.
get the number, whatever. Like it just wasn't meant to be. Like maybe I didn't do it right. It doesn't really matter. I'll just do it again another time. Or I'll do it like start another conversation. Like, and that makes it more likely that you'll get a number because you're not putting that pressure on yourself or them. Or in a fight, like you could have that confidence that you know you're gonna win, and if you lose, you're like, they beat me. Like they just fucking I am this and they beat that. So they're incredible. So you don't miss a step. It's like I didn't lose because I'm bad. I lost because they're better.
And isn't that such a, people have such mixed feelings about that kind of thing. Isn't it such a rewarding experience to be able to celebrate others rather than put the focus on yourself, your sorry ass self, or,
Mhm.
try and blame others or anything like that? It's like, wow, I'm great. This person's great too. It's such a marvel that there can be such greatness at this level. Like you're just happy to be there,
Mhm.
kind of a thing. And that's not a defeatist attitude. That is the winningest attitude,
Mhm.
truly, because nothing can shake you if you don't let it. If you're above that,
Yeah, if you
which
ma-
is the
if you
idea.
if you make it so that there's no losing, there's only people winning better. That includes you, right? Like so if you make a mistake, it's you didn't lose. It's just that thing was better than you were at the time. Doesn't mean you're bad. It means it's better. So if you get better, you can outdo it. So it's just a game of betters. It's not a game of perfects. It's not a Win or lose, it's betters. I was better, it was better. I was better, they were better. Like whatever it
Hmm.
is, just better, 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 better. Which that's the core of the positive element of self development. It's just bettering.
Yep. And that's another little phrase I tell students is 1% better is still better. Everyone thinks they have to like double their output every time. That leads to burnout or just real dark thoughts because that's hard to
Oh, and
achieve.
I think this is probably one of the most important things is that people expect to see the change as it happens, and you almost certainly won't.
Yeah, I have come to really love the concept of how bamboo works. Are you familiar with how bamboo grows?
I I watched a whole video on somebody's like, yeah, so I put up these bamboo things to like make a privacy thing. There's only like six now, but they're gonna fill it out. And then the video I watched was a guy stitching and be like, don't plant bamboo in the ground ever because everything, everything in that area will be bamboo. You have fences, doesn't matter. You have concrete, doesn't matter. Everything will be bamboo.
So that's just it. And bamboo is a good metaphor for self-development because it spends most of its development underground. You
Mhm.
don't see bamboo. But when it's ready, when it's time, whoom, it is the big lush bamboo forest that you see in all the really badass kung fu movies. Like it's it's amazing, but most of that time is spent unseen.
Mhm. Well, that's what
And
makes it
so
so pervasive. It's like if you cut them down, you're not addressing the bamboo by cutting down the stalk because the bamboo is the
that's just
root
it.
system.
Uh-huh. And that's the metaphor, right? If you are as confident as possible, then they're going to have to tear out the roots, which is fucking hard.
Hmm.
You can get
As a recent homeowner, let me tell you about weeds.
they're inspirational little fuckers. Yeah.
Still upsets me that weeds are pointy. Like they make themselves look like weeds, and it offends my sense of there being no plan to the universe. Because why? Why do they look like villain plants? Why? You would think they'd want to look like flowers. They try, but not really. It's dumb. It's a dumb thing.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Why do they look like villain plants? Fabulous. So that really is, I mean, I'm trying to number these. So probably consciousness. You have to have an awareness of what you want and how you are right now
The consistency comes first.
showing up. Well, I don't know. With like I just I
There's people with bigger podcasts than us because they didn't think about it as much as they did it.
fine. No,
Well,
that's
okay,
true. That's exactly right.
yeah, yeah. All the people did it first, and they're like, "Well, I want to get better." So the second step was them being like, "Well, I'm not getting where I want to. I'm doing it." Because that's Mr. Beast's advice, right? For YouTube people, he's like, come back when you have 100 videos, because then we can be like, okay, what's working, what's not. But if you don't have something to be conscious of, it doesn't matter. You're just making up stuff. And that's the
Right.
risk with being conscious first is you can make up a bunch of scenarios, and then you can make up new scenarios and different scenarios. So you can just be stuck being conscious.
Right. So yeah. And it is the 10,000 hour rule. And that's an arbitrary number. It's more for some, less for others. It's
Yeah, but if you spent 10,000 hours studying a thing or 10,000 hours doing a thing, the person who did it's going to be better.
oh, that's one of my favorites. So there is an actual study of a photography class that did that. So they gave half the class the assignment of study photography and you take one photo for your final. The other half of the class was go take photos, turn one in for your final. And the people that just were told to go take photos throughout the semester turned in much better photos
Hmm.
than the people who studied the theory of photography and what equipment they need and the type of lighting they should look for and blah blah blah, all the knowledge in the world. And they took decent photos but like kind of soulless and lifeless because it's like, well, this is what the book says a good photo is, rather than people who are out there in life just doing and tweaking and going, well, I don't really like the lighting in this one. What if I try this? Let's try it this way. Snap, snap, snap. What
Mhm.
if we catch the bird in flight? Oh, cool. Just all the little things, and they got to explore their creativity, find out how they are as a photographer. Not what photography should be, but how you are as a photographer. And turns out you make some good art, have a good skill set in doing so, because you also learn about many different things.
So consistency has to be, which is not our strong suit. Let's just be clear for people. We do the consciousness thing first. This project is us literally working on the seed of consistency together.
And it's important to address that, with ourselves, and just to know going in that it's simple but not easy. Consistency is probably one of the most difficult things to achieve
For some
because life gets in the way quite a bit.
for some people are consistently douchebags and they do very well in life because they're consistent. It's
It's
literally
true.
one of the things I was explaining to in my job was, um, oh, what is it? I think it's three A's, but one of them I think is attitude. And he's like, I don't care if you're an asshole, just always be an asshole. Like, let people know who you are and be that so they can expect it. They can plan around it. You can find your spot in the team, but be that. Just continue to be that. Be consistently that person.
Hmm.
So that, it can be very frustrating to the thinkers rather than the doers. But for some people, it's easy to just do and be consistent. Um, Not always in the idealistic sense, but they tend to do better on average just because
Yeah.
they're consistent.
So, and that's the trick, right? Is if you're not naturally consistent, find a way to do the thing. And just remember, because we tend to put a level on it, we keep the bar super high for what we want to achieve. But we have to remember that one step forward is still in the direction you want to go. 1% better still gets the green check mark of
Now,
better.
this is the lesson that we've recently been retaught, but I think is important is momentum, which does fit into the C's. Other than it's part of the consistency factor that okay, you get 1% better, and then you don't do anything for a month. That 1% deteriorates. You're either growing or you're shrinking, right? It's either growth or entropy. So if you want to maintain that 1%, you have to do. Here's the thing: you don't have to do 1% the next day. You just have to do 0.01% the next day. But you have to just keep putting percents on, otherwise they start to deteriorate.
Yep.
So that's why the consistency is important. It's not consistently every 6 months. You can do it 6 months, and then the next time do it 3 months. Next time do it, 2 months, whatever. But you have to grow that.
Precisely. Yeah. This was more prevalent in the 90s with change jars, because more people just spent cash on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you would just take your pocket change, however much it was. Sometimes it was a lot, sometimes it was a penny or two, put it in the change jar. And suddenly it was full and you had a whole crap ton of extra cash. And that's just how it works. You could, if you want to visualize it, just have an empty jug and put some water in it every day. It doesn't have to be the same amount. You could
Well,
sit there for hours and just fill the jug one day,
and
or just take a droplet the next
so
day.
another credit of this got really big for a while and it's fallen out of favor a little bit, but the importance of compounding. People talk about compound effort and compound interest. It's all momentum, and all momentum is consistency. So it's all just consistency, but there's these weird factors to it where one of the reasons consistency is important is momentum. The reason momentum is important is because if you're not being consistent enough, you start losing. But if you're being consistent enough, the momentum creates compounding. So imagine you put in, 5 and then you put in 5 again. Now that you're at 10, for every 10, one goes in automatically, right? So it's this when you're building up on stuff, it starts to build up on itself. So it's the it, dumb, but it's like it's the more you're winning, the more winning happens. It's stupid, but it's how the world works. It's how modern video games work. And when you're losing, it's the worst feeling ever because the more you're losing, the harder it is to win.
No, absolutely. And you see this in uh, the economic classes quite a bit. You
Hmm.
know, success begets success, and when it rains, it pours, whether that's good or bad.
Hmm.
So it is really about that, and so much of it is just you just got to show up a lot of the time.
That's the first and most important step.
Yeah, just be there.
Hmm.
You want to learn how to talk to people? Show up where there's people a lot.
Yeah.
And so, but then the next part of that, because you can repeatedly do something and not get anything from it.
Oh yeah.
That's where the consciousness and the calibration comes from. You have to pay
Yes.
attention and tweak.
Yes.
Little tweaks is
Yes.
how it works.
So
You cannot fundamentally change yourself in the course of an afternoon.
I've talked a lot about how like people that are just consistent tend to do on average do better in life. People who are thinkers then learn how to do are consistently exceptional. The best salespeople are always introverts. The best business people are always introverts because they started with the consciousness thing and then they were able to then do the doing, but then the calibration step is easy.
Yep. Once I learned that my level of playing, it's phenomenal. Like I'm a good player. And it took a long time for me to have the confidence to say that, but I'm confident in it, you know. And that's not being an asshole. I never once will I say I'm a better player than others.
Mm-hmm.
I am a good player. I leave it there, you know. Uh, and that's just it, because I learned how to analyze what I'm doing and then learn what to do to make it better,
Mm-hmm.
which can be a hard part. Sometimes you know something's wrong, but you're not quite sure what to do, or you can pinpoint something like this exact issue is happening, but you don't know what to do to fix it. And that's usually where others come in. That's where you have a mentor or a teacher or just a friend, an outside source who can look objectively at what you're doing and help.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, someone with knowledge of what you're trying to do. That's the big one.
And then at the next step, so finding what it is, and then the calibration gets tricky. Ah, damn it, said it. Almost made a whole episode without it. The calibration gets tough because you're back to a knowing state, right? Or so if you went from a thinker, now you're back to like a thinking state. Um, it's easy to slide into just the old habits. Um, so it's a separate skill to do the thing you know to do. Um, one of my biggest examples is ironically from video games because I calibrate when I play video games. I do the whole process because it's one of the ways I enjoy video games. Or to give into the capitalist thing, I justify video games for myself because I do take these skill sets to them. But it also makes me a good video game player, so I win, and that's more fun. But like in League of Legends, like if I was gonna give somebody advice on League of Legends, the biggest thing you can do to help your team is not fucking die. Um, you do that by playing conservatively at first. It's better to be a little more conservative than a little more aggressive. However, it's always tempting to just fucking make action happen. But the best thing you can do is just hang back a little bit. I know that. And there's times when I will lose stuff and I'm like, I know what I did wrong. And if I don't play for 6, 8 months, I always have to like I have to recalibrate. I have to be like, oh, right, like take your time, stuff like that. So the thing about calibration, um, I guess this is the thing about calibration. This would be the important thing is it's the combination of the consistency and consciousness. Because if you stop doing long enough, you have to recalibrate. Calibration, you don't click it in and it stays. Like that's one of the reasons I like that word for it. You have to constantly calibrate because your mood changes, the situation changes. It's always going to tilt the dial a little bit. So you have to learn how to move that dial back into place over and over and over and over
Yeah. The only constant is change. So
again.
you have to flow with it. You have to flow with it. Um, yeah. I mean, any military sniper could explain this quite easily. You
Hmm.
know, a sniper, the gun works the same way every time. but you do have to adjust everything else. And that's a huge part of it. But in doing that, like that is difficult. It's somewhat arduous and daunting sometimes to have to do that all the time, because I run into that of how frustrating is it when you're getting pretty good at something, but it's never quite there. You know, we want things to stick. The human brain wants a flag just put down and this is it, you know. We want that feeling. But sadly that's not reality in
Well,
self-development.
and your brain wants to be like, well, we know how to do this. So in the music examples, like right, like you practice a bunch, you played a piece, haven't done it for a while. It's like, okay, well, I can just do general practice and then play the piece and be as good. No, like it's like a guitar. Ryan could use the music thing. It's a guitar. The strings have been sitting. The temperature's changed a little bit. You got to tune it every time you do it. Now, if you're tuning it regularly, it's just little tunes, which is back to the consistency thing. You don't have to tune
Right.
it much if you're playing it regularly. But if you let it sit, like it doesn't just stay that way.
Absolutely. And you know, there's some, if it's like tricky technical passages in any skill, whether it's music or, you know, if it's something technical, you probably it is very much an if you don't use it you lose it type of thing. And
I
not that it goes away, it just atrophies.
Yeah,
You can reinflate that and it comes back
I
quite
learned
easily.
a couple like magic tricks and sleight of hand things, and I practiced them hundreds, thousands of times.
Sure.
And there's times when I'm like, oh, I can do this, and I'll try and like just do it like on the fly, and like I know I can. And if I spend a day or two, it comes right back. But I can, even after thousands of repetitions, if I don't warm up back to that calibration, it just doesn't work the same.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I can a challenge I put forth to my students a lot just to prove a point is I have them name notes and like octaves that they want me to play them, and I try to just pick them out. And how I do that is I first visualize how it actually sounds and feels to play those notes. And then I'm usually able to do it. But some of them, not always. Not always, because we're organic beings. So change is just part of our nature. So
Mhm.
it is micro calibrations at all times, no matter what you do. You're always calibrating. That's the secret.
Mhm.
You're always calibrating, even if you don't think you are, because your body's just slightly different than it was a few seconds ago. That's just part of reality.
And that's the sweet spot again. tr- Very cliche self development type thing, but it's the being comfortable being uncomfortable, which is the true comfortable. Is calibration's always a little uncomfortable, but you learn to calibrate enough, you don't notice that. The fitness thing is always like the really good example for that. Um, it can be a little different because when you're hopped up on pre workout and like all the endorphins are running, like that's just pure neurological joy. Um, but the getting yourself to go, especially without caffeine, the just to do it thing gets to the point where your body is like, no, and your mind's like, we're doing this, and this feels good that I'm making you do it. You learn to just enjoy the going, pushing through the uncomfort, not coming up against it, but as you're moving through it, there's just this weird satisfaction.
Absolutely. And you touched on something so important just now, where in the development of any skill or habit or just even a mindset, right? Sometimes your body, your brain doesn't want to do it. But another part of you is like, no, we're going to do it. We've discussed this a little bit. You must treat yourself like someone you are taking care of.
Mm-hmm.
My best practicing started happening when I treated myself as if I was giving a lesson to myself. Because you don't beat the shit out of yourself personally when you're treating yourself like a 10-year-old who just played something, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or even a professional, just somebody else, right? Like the advice you give other people is what you should take,
Yeah.
but we rarely do because somehow we're different. We know who we truly are. It's a bit of imposter syndrome, like internal imposter syndrome.
For an alternative way to do that, because like that works when I'm doing certain advice for myself, like when I'm feeling bad about where I am, and I'm trying to like give myself advice and comfort. That works. Um, if I'm trying to get myself to go for a walk, I can still be like, okay, yeah, sure, that sounds like good advice. Weirdly enough, what works for me is imagining. I never thought about it in this terminology before, but this is exactly how it is. Is I imagine myself as the avatar in a video game,
Hmm.
and I'm like, okay, like you're going for a walk now, and the avatar's like, like I don't want to. It's like, no, 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 like what I want to do right now in this moment, like not physically, not mentally, or even emotionally. It's the what I want this character to do outside of all your feelings and states. You're going for a walk now, so I just drag like I that whatever that part is, that's your consciousness that's separate from all the thoughts, feelings, senses. That little part of me is like, nope, this character is now going for the walk. So I just pop into that and I just drag the little avatar body out.
That's just it. And it's not, we want to be clear that this is not a form of self punishment. This is not self harm
Mm-hmm.
in any way. Because there's a lot of superficial talk of self love and positivity and things like that, but there's a lot of deep grains of truth to a lot of that stuff too. And how you address yourself is very important,
Mm-hmm.
which is why we remove, like, it's why we create third person mode, for that. Because we spend all day with ourselves. It's infuriating, it's exhausting. And try and cut yourself some slack, not in not letting yourself do stuff, because that's where I get caught up. It's like, I'm just tired, and I'm very appeasing.
Mm-hmm.
So I even to myself. So if I were like, if there's two of me, it's like, well, we need to let's go lift. It's like, it's been a rough day, and like I don't feel very good about myself and all that stuff. And if someone else had said that, I would probably just go, it's like, oh well, okay, just today, let's take it easy, and maybe tomorrow, let's take what we need,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's what I need, is to do nothing.
Yeah.
That turns out it makes it worse. It just snowballs into me being a blob on the couch half the time. But if you are to, so you have to treat yourself like someone you're taking care of, not.
Somebody responsible for.
Yes, thank you. That's really what I'm trying to
Yeah,
get
because
at.
the
Is
trouble with your thing is like they should be the same thing, which is kind of your point, right?
mhm,
But when you're doing the appease thing, it's like, oh well, I want you to feel good, but it's like, no, no, no. It's my job to make sure that you don't go 6 months out from now, and you're even more depressed because you've gained weight. It's like, no, I'm responsible for helping you get to that thing. Look, I know you don't want to do it now, but you do want in 6 months to have that result. So we're gonna do
yeah,
this because that's what you really want.
absolutely. You have to be not an authoritarian, but just an authority to
Mm-hmm.
yourself. So, and that's a whole thing. I heard from a teacher. There's you can be one of two people to yourself: is the drill sergeant, or the kindly mentor.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be a mentor to yourself. Sometimes you need tough love. Don't get me wrong. Once in a while, there's a time and a place for everything. Once in a while, the drill sergeant should kick your ass into gear. Sometimes you need that. I'll never say otherwise. But I would say most of the time, you want to be kind to yourself.
Well,
Not nice.
that
Not nice.
that's more
Be
of a
kind.
know yourself thing, to know which spice blend that you need.
Sure. But if you know yourself, you know how to get your butt in gear.
Yeah.
It's simple. It's simple, but not easy, right? It's as simple as that. So, but in doing those things, we're dancing around a lot of the cliches, but in doing this stuff consistently, you do gain confidence,
Mm-hmm.
because you get comfortable in the skill set.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it, and you have done it, and you get excited to try and do more. I can lift heavier, I can play higher, I can make one more call at the end of the day. I feel good trying to do that. You push yourself just a little bit.
Well,
I
because
talk about I'm going to go on a rant real quick, but I talk about zones, um, and it's like three spheres essentially, all one inside the other. So you have the green zone, which is something you are 100% you could do in your sleep
We
type
did a big
stuff.
rant on this on another episode. I hope you
We
remember
did?
that. Oh yeah,
No, I don't.
we went into it because
Nice.
the sweet spot is uh you're in the yellow and you breathe in the green and then you touch the red occasionally just to find where the limit is.
Uh-huh.
The
Yeah.
trouble is a lot of people will push themselves where they're only in the yellow and then constantly dolphining into the red and then they just bottom out.
Yeah.
And then the other one is you stay in the green, you just pop up to the yellow, but you're never pushing anything.
Yeah. No, that's just it.
Yeah,
And
we do a
it
whole
really is.
thing. I don't remember which
Yeah,
episode it is.
me neither. But it's an important concept to understand because it's all about knowing yourself, knowing what you can do. And it's the same in video games. I talk about this in video games a lot. There's the easy stuff, the stuff your character can do really well. There's the stuff that's challenging, but you should probably pack some health potions, or have,
Well, it's
stuff you can do, but you might fail.
okay.
But you might fail.
God mode and easy mode aren't fun.
Yeah.
If you can't beat a spot, it's not fun. You want to be able
Mm-hmm.
to beat it, but you have to work for it. That's what makes it fun. It's so silly for humans, but that's how it is. That struggle to accomplishment is so satisfying to the human psyche and human being.
Absolutely. And people find that in different ways, in different level of healthy ways,
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and but that's just it. That's the secret. There it is. You have to find a way to. People say find a way to make it fun, and I don't necessarily agree with that. It's not always about the enjoyment level, but it is about the engagement level. Find something that you can engage with.
Yeah, and play might be a better word. That's why I got really excited when you mentioned the play thing. Learn
Hmm.
to play while you practice. Whatever
Absolutely.
whatever the skill is, whatever the development is, whatever the journey is, learn to play. It's not about fun because play isn't always fun. That's one of those distinctions. You're like, oh well, fun and play are mutually inclusive. They're not. Um, you can be playing and like a sport, right? Any sport, like if you're really into a sport, like you're gonna lose. You're gonna go out, like you might lose a match, you might lose a round, whatever it is. Um, but if you're still playing, that doesn't get you down because you're engaged in the whole game.
Yeah, there's a common phrase in music practice, and it's if you sound good in the practice room, you're probably not practicing right. The way I describe it is if you only play what you're good at, you're not practicing, you're masturbating.
Mm,
And I don't tell that to teenage students, obviously, that's a
yeah.
whole thing, but but that's essentially the gist of it. If you're just doing what you're already good at and thinking that's developing, you're just whacking off.
Hmm.
Like you're just doing it to feel good. And there's no harm in celebrating what you're good at. There's no harm in having the confidence and knowing that and celebrating it. But don't mistake that for getting it to be better.
Hmm.
It's just a whole thing. So you can dance on a plateau. Just know you're on a plateau.
Yeah. And when it loses its sensations, you need more of it, right? So if you get stuck in that green zone, um, so let's say you're pushing in the yellow and your green zone moves into the yellow more. Um, if you stay in that green, you have to keep doing more and more and more of it, and at some point, you just kind of you don't burn out. You just pull all the vitality out of it. And some people will keep doing that because it's comfortable, um, but other people will keep doing it and then just lose the feeling for it, and they're
Yeah.
not sure why because they're like, well, I'm good at this. I don't feel it the same way I used to. And it's because you it felt good when you expanded and turned it into a green. But if it's only the green, then it just loses that. You have to keep making new green, as it were. Grass is always greener on the other side, so keep pushing to that other side in that way. We're gonna use hodgepodge metaphors.
That's okay. So now about the Mongol conquest.
Just conquest in general, really.
Yes, it's true.
Speaking of
But
C's, we have one more C,
what
right?
is it?
You added it to four.
We
So
kind of meshed one. So this the four C's: of self-development: consistency, consciousness, calibration, confidence.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So because that's the result. You're not trying to. I guess the point there is there's no destination in any of those. The
Mhm.
destination is the confidence.
Yeah, that's when you get into God mode, and it is fun.
Hmm.
But it's just really important to have so those are the four elements, sure, but there's a lot of nuance built around those that you want to make sure you're aware of. You don't have to have all the answers, but you just got to be aware that there's usually more to it, and that's where people get daunted.
I To our credit, which, and by our credit I mean the fact that we've studied a bunch of other people, found all the things that worked, and learned all the things that other people spent decades researching. You don't need more than those four C's. Like
Nope.
if we're gonna talk about the self development thing, like if you're somebody listening to this thinking, oh, I would like to be better and I want to take something away from this, write those four C's down in that order: consistency, consciousness, calibration, confidence slash comfortability. Um, and then whatever it is you're doing, do in that order and just focus on those things. I would be pretty confident to say I guarantee you'll see positive results.
Yep. And the underlying soul of it all is that you need patience and optimism,
Mm-hmm. I don't
because
know about
repetition
optimism.
is the mother of all skills. Everything takes time.
Yes.
Everything takes time. I
Yes.
can't, none of us, no one knows how much time necessarily. Like 10,000 hours is kind of a general, thing, but everything takes time. So having patience
Let's
is
make it another
one of the best
alliteration.
things.
In order to achieve the four C's, you need patience and positive perspective.
Well,
Wow.
peas, peas. You need peas for C's. I love it. Pirates. Yeah.
But yeah, it's the comment I made like partway through is everybody, and you will always do this to some degree, doesn't matter who you are. You expect to see results too soon. In fact, you expect to actually watch the change. You never see the change. Like until after it happens. I guess that's the thing. You don't see the change while it happens. You see it after it happens.
Yep. The river doesn't know it's going to make a canyon. It just somehow ends up at the bottom one day.
Yeah, if you took a picture of yeah, if you started pushing water down a path and took a picture every single day, for 90% of the days you wouldn't notice a change. If you went between the first 10 and the last 10, it would be unrecognizable.
Yes. And this is why tracking your progress as loosely or as concretely as you want to, that's completely up to you, the individual. But some kind of tracking and documentation is one of the most helpful things. I have 4 volumes of practice journals for a reason. It's reflection, it's planning, it's notes from mentors. I took I took notes after every one of my lessons. My professor he was in a long hallway in Madison, and at the end of the hallway, there was a bench next to a window. I was there after every lesson, just brain dumping. And it didn't even have to make much sense at the time,
Mm.
because you can make sense of it later, but you got to try and just try and codify your thoughts, put your thoughts into the physical realm so that you have something to use. Because the biggest lie we will ever tell ourselves in this life is, "Oh, remember that."
Yeah.
Yeah. Or "I've learned this lesson." No, you haven't. You have to practice the lesson. You said this. It's a choice you make reoccurringly
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah, decision is a choice you keep making.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't like that that's
And yeah,
real,
so
but it is.
it really is about being present in it all. Oh, Okay, that was weird.
Yeah, for some that's happened.
Yeah.
Here's
Is it me?
to new
Might be
mistakes.
me today.
Is it me?
Right.
Am I the problem?
Am I the drama? But I don't know where I cut off, but it really is just being present in it most of the time.
If you want to use P's, uh, persistent, patient, and present.
Honestly. Or what is the other one? Positive?
Yeah, which that's not necessary. You don't have to be positive. It just helps.
We misconstrue the word. So I think what we're getting at is that the positive portion is tied directly to the confidence portion.
Mm-hmm.
Because nothing bothers me more in self development than the you rah rah, you can do it, you're anything because you're awesome. It's like, that's so utterly superficial. That is just like too much sweet sugar taste in my mouth. The, you know, there's a series out there, and I'm sure it helps a lot of people. So more power to you. But I tried to read You Are a Badass, and I
Mm.
wanted to throw up in my mouth. I just can't handle that kind of superficial positivity. Now, some people that's a good starting point because they just need the boost.
Yeah,
They just need someone to kiss their ass for a second, which is valid at points.
they just need a spark to get the fuel going.
Yeah, there's a time and a place for everything. That's one of my main like rules of life. There's a time and a place for every type of thing. So, but that is not the be all end all by far. So you do need the patience and to develop the confidence of not just I can do anything. It's no, I can do this with time and persistence.
Mm.
And if I'm paying attention, I can do this. Yeah. You can try and master skydiving, but you really only get one shot if that's your goal. You know what I mean? Like
It's my favorite old school dark humor jokes. If at first you don't succeed, skydiving is not for you.
I was like, well, as the Buddhists say, better luck next time.
It's a good one. All right, I think our connection's starting to go. I think I we didn't tangent into weird places. We tangented a lot, which is just kind of what we do.
We're working on that. But honestly, tangents are not bad necessarily. It's unfortunate for consumers who just want the raw data. But
Well, that we have made a separate type of media called the deep dives, which the next episode we put out will be a deep dive where it is hyper focused.
absolutely, it's going to be a trip in a good way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we picked a really meta thing to do on brand, but it will get into more not meta stuff. The chats will always probably be, meta, kind of like the name.
It's what we do.
Yeah.
But as I was kind of saying, our tangents are not because we don't care about what we're talking about. It's that it's our way of kind of gathering it all and showing everyone that it's all universal. You know, everything is connected to everything else in a way.
My point is that in the ugliness episode, we switched from talking about what ugliness is to just talking about ugly things, just talking about ugly things. So for this, I feel pretty confident we stayed on the self development thing, but we'll have to re-listen to it. There's other stuff we want to talk about, so we'll just have to do those in different episodes.
We showed up. We're aware of our shortcomings. We will review and tweak. We're following the 4 C's because you and I know that we can get this to be much better for people who want to listen to us.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing it, y'all.
Keep on keeping on. Or something.
Yeah.